Well, I've
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Explaining the Unexplainable. I am one of the hosts here, Mercedes Lucky Benedict, and I've got my co host over here, Bishop Joshua Sparks.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Woohoo! Yeah,
Thanks,
and we
thanks for
miss
your
you.
prayers.
We
Missed
miss
you
you.
too.
Yeah, don't you be
Yeah,
getting sick again.
I'm trying not to.
No more. Hey. So we had a good show, and we had the unearthed paranormal here, and they were amazing. So I hope everybody checks out their new broadcast. I did. It was just happened. The new one that they were giving clips for, and oh my gosh, they are just so good at editing and just really they're doing a good job. So I think we should all watch that. So be sure to check it out on their YouTube channel. All right. Bishop Joshua Sparks, will you take it away for our amazing guest?
Yes, we do have an amazing guest, and he is no stranger to explaining the unexplainable. Picture music fading in, a low, eerie undercurrent with a subtle howl of wind in the background. Welcome, friends, to another chilling episode of Explaining the Unexplainable, where faith, folklore, and the mysterious collide in the shadows between truth and terror. I'm your host, Joshua O. Sparks, with my amazing co host, Mercedes Lucky Benedict, who I call insightful and fearless. She's my insightful and fearless co host.
Yeah.
And tonight, we invite you to settle in for something special, something fall like, something October like, something Halloween like. The leaves are whispering outside. The Appalachian wind hums through the trees like a ghostly choir. The sun has tucked itself beneath the mountains a little earlier tonight, and the world feels just a bit thinner. Like the veil between what is and what isn't has begun to shift. So grab your blanket, pour that hot coffee,
I don't have a blanket.
stories that might just make you sleep with the lights on, because tonight we're not just telling stories, we're chasing shadows. And speaking of shadows, our guest tonight knows them better than anybody else. He's an author, he's a journalist, he's a conference speaker, and the host of the hit show Shadows of Legend. You've seen his name in print, you've heard his voice at Bigfoot conferences, and maybe, just maybe, you felt that chill down your spine when he talks about the things that go bump in the night. Maybe you've seen his picture at the post office. I'm not sure. But please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome one of my dear friends that I love. And yes, he's real. I've touched him, shook his hand, I've hugged his neck. I know he's real. Charles Romans, I want to welcome you tonight. Welcome you
thank
to
you for that
Explaining
glowing.
the Unexplainable. So we're excited to have you here tonight. I mean, I've got all the lights turned out. I've got my little lantern turned on here. And it's that perfect time of the year, crisp air, dark evenings, and stories waiting to be told. So before we dive, though, into the eerie,
Yes.
tell us a little bit about what's new in your world right now, Charlie. You've been on quite a journey. You know, not only are you a journalist, a paranormal investigator, but now you're a Bigfoot conference speaker. So what's the latest chapter in your story, brother?
Well, I was really lucky to have done an interview with a lady named Tabitha Stiegel, who decided that this was going to be the year that she started a Bigfoot festival in Olive Hill, Kentucky. And of course, I interviewed her for one of the newspapers I work for. I do a lot of stuff for the Carter County Times, and wonderful to interview. She's been doing research for at least a decade, and so I jumped in and I helped her with this, and I was fortunate enough to be a speaker there. A lot of people talking about Bigfoot and related subjects. And it was just a good time had by all, really. And it's going to be an annual event now. And maybe a little push in the right directions, we might get a museum out of it in Olive Hill.
Now, that would be awesome. Now, see, that's where I work. So that would be awesome. And I know Tabitha and Jason quite well. I used to pastor the church they attend.
Yes.
So I know them quite well, and I know that she's credible,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that she has really seen what she saw. I've seen her footage.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really put two and two together when I first started pastoring the church she attends back several years ago. Gosh, it's been, 5-6 years ago now. But, I've seen the video footage of a lady who recorded a Sasquatch at Carter Caves, and that's the first place I saw Bigfoot as well. One of the first places. So, when I met her, we started talking about Bigfoot and found out that we both had a mutual, hobby. I've investigated Bigfoot for many years, and sometimes I feel like he's investigating me, like there's something drawing me to the woods. Maybe it's just, I don't know what it is, but you've covered everything from haunted Appalachia to cryptid encounters. So what's been your most surprising or unsettling discovery lately?
Well,
It don't have to be unscary.
I think I started my life unsettled because I had a grandfather that was an amazing storyteller. And I always remember him being old, and he had arthritis, and he would stick that finger up like there and tell you, now, honey, let me tell you something. And he would tell you these horrible tales, and he would tell you these things as truth. And a lot of them were legends passed down. So really, I started out, I hit the ground running, so to speak. And it's kind of amusing because right now, Appalachia's having a moment in the paranormal. Actually, we're having two moments because the way we talk, it takes us a while to get around to the subject. But
amen to that.
People talk about, in Appalachia, if something calls your name, don't answer. They act like they invented that and just discovered it. I've literally known that for 55 years. So if out at night and something calls your name, it's probably nothing that's friendly to you.
Run.
You have the ability and to put that aside. And typically, they don't follow you in the house, but they may be scratching around the eaves of the windows and whispering under the door frames. That happens a lot.
Oh yeah. It kind of reminds me of when a story my dad told me about when they were younger. And my dad used to do a lot of work in. They'd done a lot of paranormal research and a lot of investigations into the demonic. Him and my, I call my uncle. We're very much involved in deliverance ministry. I ain't talked about that much, but I'm going to get into that in one of my messages one time, or one of my books many books I'm writing. But talked about our cousin that passed away, and how that he would walk down the street every night, and how that he would walk with one of our cousins, and it tormented her, it plagued her because she felt like it was him but knew it wasn't. And how that there was a spirit that would walk down the road and they could hear it whistling and it sounded like him. And then this spirit would stick its head to the door and its hair would fall around its face and scare everybody. And my family called him Hitch Coffee. That's what they called spirits. My great-great-grandmother, who was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian, called him Hitch Coffee. And my dad and his friend went down there and prayed and rebuked the spirit. And it left. But, Charlie, I kind of was raised in a haunted house. And I know I don't talk about this much, Mercedes, because it gives me the willies, and I don't get scared about nothing hardly. But I remember as a kid, we had a 3-room house. We had a living room, a bedroom, a kitchen. You had to walk outside, down around the house into the basement to go to the bathroom. And every time you get in that dark corner where the toilet was, there would be something in there going,
oh my God.
the hot air off this thing. and it was scary and it was tormenting. My dad rebuked it and cast it out of there. But the property where we grew up was there was all kinds of ghost stories surrounding that property. And Mercedes, I've heard your stories too. There's all kinds of tales that when I come down and visit you and Joe next year, I'm going to sleep with the lights on.
I won't sleep in the cabin. I won't. I still will not sleep in the cabin, and I vowed that nobody really will, unless you want to. But
well, I'm gonna bring Charlie Romans with me. We're going to camp out right on the front porch of the cabin.
Well, yeah. I mean, we just had somebody out. Like the team did come out. What's her name? Becky. They did come out, and we had a little bit too much noise going on with the family. There was a lot of that was kind of messed up with the dogs and everything. But next time I'll have people leave probably. But there was something they could still hear some things. It's much better though. It's much better. It really is. If there's there's no bad things here. It's nice, but there was bad. There really was. And that bathroom story, oh my God. So when the kids were here, that's what they saw. There was something in there. It was just a little cabin. There's a little ghost girl. There's a boy. There's a girl. And it would just scare our poor little boy to be scared to death with that thing.
I've got a picture from 1983. And we have a color computer hooked up to a television in my mom in the only bedroom we had at that house. Me, mom, my dad, and my sister slept in it, and my grandparents and everybody else slept out in the living room. And we had like 1 million people living in that little house. It was crazy, but that was home. Everybody come there. When they tore that place down, our family fell apart. It's crazy. But there's a picture of my sister standing in front of that television, and there's this weird looking creature upside down looking at her through this TV, and it's off. And this is before CGI, before AI. I'm going to have to get a copy of that picture and post it for everybody to see, because it is very, very freaky.
Was it the old-fashioned one where they took it and the picture pops out? Because I know people they still tried that on investigations. Remember the old one? It go, there's a picture.
Yeah,
old-fashioned one.
Well, no, this one is just it's there. I mean, it's crazy. I can't explain it. I'll have to get it to you and show you. It's just it's a phenomena. It's very, very. It was very unsettling then, and it's something that still is today, because I can't explain it. But that's why we have this show, right? Explaining the unexplainable. You got somebody like Charlie that lives and breathes and us, the unexplained. Charlie, what do you think draws people generation after generation to these mysteries? What is it about the shadow that draws us into it?
I think we're trying to, in a very real way, we're trying to reclaim something we've lost, because as time marches on, we're talking about decades and centuries, we get farther and farther from the connection to, the world around us and the world in the shadows of the world around us. So we are trying to reach back and find these things. I think that's why it fascinates us so much. Matter of fact, I recently interviewed Wes Forsyth, who is the media director for the Scarefest weekend. We were talking about horror movies, and his take was, we've eliminated everything that can threaten us. We really aren't in danger on a day-to-day basis. So we like horror movies because we still like to be scared and get the adrenaline rush. And it's kind of the same thing as that we get farther away from the practical spirituality, I think you could call it. And the farther we get away from that, we realize we've missed something, and it's like we've lost something we barely knew we had. So we're seeking it out, but we don't really know how to find it. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's a good way to put it. Excuse me, you've met eyewitnesses, you've met skeptics, you've met believers alike.
Yes.
Is there ever, we're going to give you plenty of time to tell us stories tonight, but I just want to kind of set the foundation.
All
I
right.
think about this and I thought, what can I ask him to get him ready to rock? You know what I mean? So, Nate, well, tell me one encounter that's kept you up at night, Charles Romans.
There's a couple of things, and
Now this I gotta hear because I know Charles Romans ain't afraid of nothing.
no, not as a rule. Yes, but years ago, and I shared this when I was speaking at Scarefest, that I had a vivid dream one night, and the house we were living in when I had this dream, it was just one of these old box houses. I mean, it was old as Methuselah, but if you walked into the front door, walked into the living room, and directly to the right was the door to my bedroom, and then of course you had the rest of the house on in there. Well, there's one of those really old gas stoves on the far end of this living room. And I had a dream. I woke up and I couldn't move. And I was underneath the covers, my head and everything else covers. So, and that annoyed me. I wasn't actually scared, but it aggravated me that I was wrapped up in these covers and I couldn't move. So I struggled around and I sat up and I heard this audible snapping sound. And I looked down and I'm actually setting up through the covers. So there's my upper body and the covers are wrapped around it and I'm through them. And I thought, okay, I'm dreaming because that's not normal. but still in the throes of this, I try to stand up. And you know how it is sometimes when you're in a dream, you feel like you're underwater. Well, rather than stand up, I fell out of the bed. Now, I always slept with the door closed. Well, when I fell out of the bed, I fell through my room and into the living room in front of the old heater. Well, in place of this old heater was this huge ornate chair like a throne. And my tiny little 5 foot nothing mother is sitting in this throne. And she looks at me and she's got this really strange, raspy voice. And she says, "What's the matter? Can't sleep?" And I'm like, "What?" And when I do that, I blink. And it's not my mother in this chair. It's this demon. And this demon starts laughing. And at that point, I decide, yes, I am dreaming. I'm going to wake up and stand. I wake up. And I get out of bed, and of course, because it's kind of traumatic, I walk in there, and yes, there is the heater's there, not a chair holding a demon or anything like that. So I go in and I get me a cup of coffee, and I go on about my business. Now, when I told this at Scarefest, I said, now I do believe this is a very vivid dream. However, this dream has all of the earmark of an out-of-body experience. And added into the possibility of an out-of-body experience, there was a demon masquerading as my mother. Okay, so that's it. The idea of that is very traumatic. And perception being what it is, I can't say with 100% certainty whether that was actually a dream or whether it was an experience. But like Billy Mays said, wait, there's more.
Oh,
okay. So fast forward 30 some years later, and the first interview I did for the paper about the paranormal was with this group called the Graham County Paranormal Society. Now, later, I got to be friends with all of them. But at the time, I had just spoken with the lead investigator, Steve Garton, on the phone. So we met in South Shore at the picnic shelter, and we're sitting out there. I've got my little recorder out there, and no one called me by my name. I think a couple of times they said Mr. Romans. So we're doing this interview, and we're enjoying it and everything else. And so I thank them for taking the time to do the interview. I go home, and I plug my recorder into the computer, and I'm playing this recording back, and I'm writing the story. I'm like, wait a minute. So I back up the recording and play it the second time. And then the second time I heard it, I knew what it was. So I yell at my wife. I said, "Come here a minute." She said, "What do you want? I'm busy." I said, "Well, I want you to listen to this." So I made her sit down and put the headphones on. I said, "Just hit play." So she hit play and her eyes got real wide. And she said, "Oh my God, that's your mother's voice." And my mother had been here by this time. Now,
Wow.
and this is the challenges and the potential dangers of the paranormal. I personally believe with 100% certainty that that was my mother's voice on that recording. I'm not, however, sure that it was her using it.
Right.
Segue into what Josh does on a daily basis. You know how deceptive these entities can be.
Very.
Oh, God. You know what? That there were times in this house, like they mimicked my voice. Tristan heard it, Mark heard it, Joe didn't, but but Tristan did, and he was like, it was calling his name. I was not home. One time Mark was standing outside and he heard um, me talking to him from the house, but I wasn't home. But he said they were exactly my voice, so they mimicked my voice. So yeah, I do believe. I mean, but yeah, we want to believe it was your mother, but they can do it. I mean, I'm sure that your mother could come out, but it is weird that
Well, one of the hesitations is this. My mother was a very religious woman, which is one of the reasons she was frustrated with me growing up, because I was the wild child.
Imagine that.
And ironically, I would do something silly or stupid or something like that, and she'd say, "Charlie," like that, like, "Charlie, shut up and don't be an idiot." And that was what was picked up on this EVP.
Wow.
And
so they knew what she said, how she said it, and so
yeah,
but maybe it was her.
It could have been, and it's comforting to think that maybe it was. But the other hesitation is my mother being a very religious person. I'm not sure that she would come back to say anything, because she would think you weren't supposed to do that.
That makes sense. That's so true. That's so true.
Kind of reminds me of a story I heard of this man. Every time he messed up and done something wrong, his dad would always say, "Well, what did you do this time?" And his dad had died and went to heaven some years before, and he got into an accident and died. And he went to heaven and he saw his dad, and he said the first words out of his dad's mouth was, "What did you do this time?" So he knew it was his dad. So, I mean, sometimes that veil's very thin. Sometimes I believe that God allows us to hear the voice of our loved ones to give us that extra witness that the great cloud of witnesses brings to us, to keep us on the firing line, so to speak, to keep us marching forward. Sometimes God lets that veil wear thin so we can hear, so that it can encourage us. And maybe that's what you heard, Charlie. Maybe it wasn't sinister or diabolical at all. Maybe it was your mother.
It's built that because my mother was always my sounding board and everything like that, and a very in spite of it, it's kind of like the Merle Haggard song "Mama Tried." Okay,
Mama tried to love make me better.
That's it, exactly.
Now, did she write that song and give it to Merle to sing about you?
She must have, but she didn't give up on me, so that's a good thing. And I like to think that I wasn't too horrible, but at any rate,
hey, you couldn't be any worse than Charlie Paycheck. He was all the hell his mom ever raised.
That's funny. It's funny.
But it's funny. There's always one in the family, and that one was me. So, but now, as far as the spiritual aspect of it, my mom notwithstanding, there have always been ghost stories. People have always seen paranormal. I like to, well, and I'm reaching here, but story of Cain and Abel. Cain was not necessarily evil. Cain was angry, and Cain fought with his brother, and his brother died. Okay, and I'm sure I've got an older brother. I'm sure there's many times that he's wanted to hit me in the head with a rock, and some actually would have deserved it, but fortunately he did not, and whatnot. But so I don't think he was necessarily evil. So by not being pure evil, I'm sure Cain was haunted by the specter of Abel for the rest of his days.
Oh yeah.
So and as long as there's been death, I think we've wondered, when does that end? I like to think, and I believe in, not to put too fine a point on it, we've talked about it a lot, Josh, but I believe in intelligent design. I don't believe we're here by accident.
Mm.
So, but since I don't believe we're here by accident, there has to be a purpose, and we want to think that we go on beyond the physical. So, when we have a loved one pass away, then we're wondering, well, what happened to them? And religion explains a lot of this, but I think on a more visceral level, I think we seek the spiritual because we seek it as a continuance. I don't think any of us can accept truly that this is all there is to existence.
No, there's not. This is the way. This is just the earth plane.
Well, if you consider that energy is neither created nor destroyed, from a scientific standpoint, that there's energy that leaves our body. It's not destroyed. The meat may not last, but the energy that animates us. And on the subject of that energy, I had an interesting thought here recently. Human beings are electrochemical organisms, and that giant chunk of meat stuffed in our skull that we call gray matter generates the spark, and that's how we think. And I think our thinking mechanism is connected to what most people would consider to be the psyche or the soul. Well, that generates energy. Now, it's a small amount. It's not like you could poke someone's brain and get shocked, but it does exist. And if you consider that there is electricity in the human body, well, bone and skin isn't a very good insulator. So, for all we know, our thoughts and our feelings are just bleeding through our skulls, and it's floating around there. Just other people usually can't interpret that. However, beings that are energy, for instance, once a person would become a ghost, or if you want to carry this to its ultimate, expression, angels and devils and God, then maybe they just pick up on all this. And in the case of negative spirits, then I believe that's what they feed off of, because you know all these ghost hunters talk about their batteries being drained. Well, I think that maybe is a side effect once the spirit makes a connection with the person. But if it was just about power, why doesn't a ghost just float up and stick its finger in a light socket and they'll be charged up for days? They can be, go on tour and whatnot. I think there has to be the human element, and all this other thing is just I don't know. It's just a side effect. But
I believe that. I want to hear a ghost story.
Well, we're getting ready to head up to that. And this is, like I said, we're setting the stage, setting the tone for all this tonight. My ear's itching for some reason. I got a bobby pin here, so I better not use it, because my grandmother used to pick her ears with bobby pins.
Well, I know the people take the old knives and pick their ears with knives, but I always heard growing up, don't put anything in your ear smaller than your elbow. Yeah, because there's sensitive stuff in there. Well, mine's full of muddy water, but still, I don't want to, poke the sack and have it all drain out.
Well,
one of my favorite ghost stories of all time, and it's one I heard years ago. And I think about it when I walk into the studio, my producer's studio.
Well, hold on, Charlie. Before you get started, hold on 1 second. We got to set the tone for this, okay?
Okay.
So, tonight as the fire crackles and the wind moans outside, Charlie, take us there. Take us to one of these moments, past or present. So listen, settle in, listeners. Dim your lights if you dare, because what you're about to hear will make your heart race, your imagination spark, and your skepticism tremble. Charles Romans, the mic is yours. Take us into the dark.
That's a tough act to follow, John. But years ago, before Edison's invention ruptured the sanctity of the night, the world was lit by torches. And then soon after that, it was lit by the guttering flame of gaslight. On one night, and this is back in England, a man was home from a long day working. He's casting furtive glances back and forth in the shadows of the buildings between the small islands of light, because there are more things than people to be. As he nears one building that's familiar, that it's his home, he reaches into a tattered coat and he pulls out the stub of a candle, and he walks to the gaslight lamp, and he opens the door and he lights his stub of a candle, closes the door back carefully, and he shades this as he walks toward his door, because this is his guard against the darkness. So he fumbles with his key, the latch of the door, and then he locks the door carefully behind him. He reaches over on a stand near the door and picks up a battered candle holder, and he puts his stub of this tallow candle in his candle holder, and he's shading it with his hand as he's walking through this house slowly. This is an older man. His house is empty. His wife has passed. All of his children have grown and moved on. And he goes carefully to each room of the house, checking the latch on each window. He climbs a rickety stairs to the next level, and he casts his eyes down a hallway that's flickering shadows in his feeble light. And though he doesn't want to, he's compelled to walk down this hallway and check the other room, make sure that they are indeed empty, until finally he goes into his own bedchamber, and he gets down painfully because he's old and he's bent with care, and looks underneath the bed, and seeing nothing there, he goes over, he opens his closet, and it being empty as well, he proceeds to put on his nightclothes. So when all of this is done, he goes back to his bed. He draws all the curtains around him, crawls into under the covers, and he leans over and blows out his light, satisfied, safe, and alone. And then a voice from the darkness in his ear whispered, "Good, now we're in for the night."
Wow.
What did he say? What was it then?
It says, "Good, now we're in for the night."
That was good.
Ooh, that was really good.
I read that story when I was still a child, and I always thought that I can see this old man struggling and he's fearful and he's tired, and he just wants to sleep, but he's too terrified to sleep. So, and
very good. I could see it, like the whole time when you were talking, I could see it.
Well, I didn't write the story, so credit goes to whoever had story probably 300 years ago.
You told it really good.
Yes. Well, that I love the old. A lot of people, when they hear Charles Dickens, they think of Scrooge. But my favorite works by Charles Dickens was the Pickwick Papers, the ghost stories. You know what I'm talking about, Charles?
Yeah.
The old ghost stories. And every year, this time of the year, my dad and myself, we watch the cartoon animated version of the Pickwick Papers.
Oh,
But
I'll have to look at that.
I'll have to send a link to you, Mercedes.
I would love to watch that.
But to hear you tell these stories kind of reminds me of sitting around because, it was dark and it was around the table. They was having their club meeting. It was a windy fall night. And they were really inebriated by these stories. And these were true stories. So.
Well, simply because it seems to be fantastical doesn't mean it's not true.
Right.
Now, things do grow compelling, but I always tried to find the story behind the story. One episode of my podcast, I sort of deconstruct A Christmas Carol. And the behind the scenes story to this is actually kind of horrifying because you're talking about the three spirits. They're well, as Robin Williams says, phenomenal cosmic power. Okay, they could have fixed everything, but they gambled with Scrooge's soul on the offhand chance that he could fix it himself.
That's true.
That's a good. I just love I love the one that's with George C. Scott. That's my favorite one.
Yes.
I watch it every year. One of the things I was thinking of real quick was on the Andy Griffith show when they have a camp out with the boys, the guys and Gomer's there, and they do a campfire. I don't know. They sit by the fire and they go, "Tell us a ghost story." And then so Andy Griffin's like, it's about the person that lost their golden arm, and Andy's like, "Who stole my golden arm? Who stole my golden arm? You did." And then Barney and Gomer just laugh. They're so scared. That's my fun. I just thought I'd.
Well, my dad said that when, of course, it's a bunch of farm boys, there wasn't much to do. So they would go way back in the hill and build a bonfire. I'm surprised it didn't burn the woods down. But they would go way back on top of a hill in the middle of nowhere and build a fire and start telling ghost stories until one of them got scared. And then when one got scared and started running, of course, they all ran. But of course, and it's funny because there's a rich tradition of ghost stories, and everything from the woman who comes back from the grave because she was not buried in the burial shroud that she had saved for just that purpose for decades. One of her neighbors, who was supposed to be her friend, decides that, that's too good a shawl to bury someone in. She'll be burlap. Well, so they went back to get it. And they didn't have for the friend who betrayed the trust. So, and a lot of, and that is one aspect of just a lot to teach a lesson, to teach us of our failings and things we shouldn't do.
My grandmother used to tell a story. My dad liked to go wander off when he was a kid, 2 and 3 years old. He would go and wander off. And when he was 4 and 5, he would go where they were building new houses. And Dad still tells it to this day, They go where they were building new houses. You get on all the machinery and mess with the gears. He said, God have mercy, when they'd start those machines up the next morning, the arms would be swinging on and, going crazy. But he said they told him that there was an old man that lived in the alley that had a knapsack. And he caught little boys who cut their heads off and put their heads in that knapsack. They told him that to try to keep him home. And he was fast. My dad was super fast. So he would start at the top of the hill right before he got to that alley. And he said by the time he come over the hill running, he was doing about 100 miles an hour heading to the house. It never stopped him from doing what he wanted to do, but it always put fear in him. So,
well, get the adrenaline up, and that's good for a person, especially if they're in no immediate danger.
right.
And I may have told you this before along those lines. I grew up in a place called Rush, and Rush Hill.
Oh yeah,
like a mile long hill. Okay, so I had one of these times I decided I was going to get fit, which didn't really work well for me, but I was young. So I jogged across the hill to visit my buddy Greg, and while I'm there playing basketball, and my other buddy Paul, his sister was there, and his sister was a very pretty young lady, and so I was playing basketball, watching Paul's sister, and then Greg asked me, "Say, hey, how you getting home?" I said, "Well, the same way I got here. I jogged over here." He said, "Well, you better get going because it's kind of dark, getting dark." And I looked around, yeah, it is getting dark. So I take off, and I get to the top of the hill before I encounter anything. But as I start down the hill, well, this time it's twilight, and I can hear the echoes of my footsteps in the woods next to this road, because this road is bounded on both sides with trees. It is really just a path through the trees, and so I'd stop, and you'd hear that crunch, crunch, when something does it that's following me. No, you're going to stop. And this happened 2 or 3 times, and then I said, okay, it's time to really get out of here. So and fortunately, I lived to tell the tale, but I am certain that something was stalking me down that hill. So,
could it be Sasquatch? Because out there in Rush, I worked for the Independent for about 14 years as a carrier and also as a district sales manager. And the routine, if a person won't pass, you got to go out and pass the route. Well, one of my carriers was killed in an automobile accident, so they had like 7 or 8 routes, and I had to pass them that night. So out Rush, driving along 854,
right.
Me and the young man I had with me, we saw 2 or 3 UFOs, in so much that they came down not too far above the treetops. I completely forgot about this. And we actually saw it in the daylight hours as well, because we worked well into the morning, and it was a cigar-shaped UFO. But from eye shines to noises to all kinds of strange and unusual things in Rush that's taken place. I've had friends that lived out there, and Rush seems like a hotbed for all kinds of paranormal things that go on.
There aren't haunted places in Rush. Rush is a haunted place. So from one end to the other. And the thing of it is, when you grow up there, when you experience these things, then I don't know if it so much desensitizes you, but you are less likely to jump to conclusions. So you develop the skill to know, okay, that's something that's odd. And that's a barn owl, or that's a stray dog or something. So you're not quick to believe or disbelieve. You have a more direct knowledge of what's odd and what's not.
The country gives you free education.
Yes, it does.
A lot of people don't. I was sitting here thinking of there's thousands of ghost stories. I was thinking about some of the old Scottish ghost stories I've heard. About the castle there at Ayrshire Cliffs, where I think it was 1570, the Earl of the Cassilis captured the abbot of Crossraguel Abbey and roasted him alive until he agreed to sign over his lands. And Sir Archibald the Wicked of Chaldean, he was a man so evil. It was said he was so evil that the devil himself attended his funeral. I've met people that have been evil, but not that evil. And it's said that he haunts that place still. There's stories of ghostly knights dressed in armor who appears to household staff, or the phantom piper who plays on stormy nights as the waves pound the cliffs below. playing his bagpipes. There's all kinds of, back when I was a kid, and of course, I love all kinds of drama. I love stage plays. But back when I was a kid, we used to watch the old Dark Shadows series.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
When I was 12 years old, I met Jonathan Frid that played Barnabas. I met him in Huntington, West Virginia. He was doing a traveling show called Fools and Fiends. And it was for the college students there at Marshall. I was 12 years old. I was the youngest person there. I'll never forget. We were standing at the back of the line after the show. And he looked down through the long line, and he saw me back there, and he said, "Hey, you, come here." Took me in front of everybody. Spent 45 minutes with me and my dad talking, signing all of our scrapbooks. My mother was afraid of him. He's a big guy. I mean, he's a lot bigger than what you think, about 6'1", 6'1.5". And just, he had that look about him. But, hearing him go through his spiel of, when they let him out of the coffin, he was locked away for 200 years in the casket. And because his father, Joshua, couldn't bear to kill him. And how that he came out and he told the story of all the things that happened leading up to him being locked in the casket, and then him addressing all the spirits that were there in the house, that he was home, that he'd come back. But it's kind of like, people, and remember the old movie in the 80s, sometimes they come back.
Yes.
You get the sense sometimes of people, because a lot of times people are seen doing the same things they did when they were alive.
We see
in
a
the
lot
home that they died in or lived in.
There's a wonderful legend. I mean, I say wonderful. It's actually quite horrific. The demon bridegroom. This woman who was supposed to be married, and her fiance is killed so she grieves so powerfully for the loss of her love that he comes back from the dead and drags her to hell.
Wow.
So it isn't actually a wonderful story, but it is a very powerful statement on grief. And a lot of these things people believed, and ghosts. You mentioned Jonathan Frid, of course, where you play Barnabas Collins, the vampire. Okay, vampires are an interesting thing. All the undead are interesting because we yearn toward the spiritual, but we fear the negative effects. And this led to people were so terrified that people would return from the dead that they would do things like cut their feet off, hobble them, everything else, just to prevent their loved ones from coming back as undead and prey on them.
Have you heard the Native Americans when I was doing the research for the documentary that there are some tribes, I think they're in Arizona, I'm pretty sure that they will when someone dies, they would go and destroy their house and their teepees or whatever they had, because they didn't want them coming back into that house again. And that's like real. I have to find out more, but that's what it was. They didn't want them coming back come back.
Well, all of these ornate coverings for graves and mausoleums and things like that, it was a combination of that fear and, of course, trying to prevent grave robbers from disturbing the rest of their loved ones. And that is a common fear throughout cultures and all the way across the world.
Yeah,
no, I wouldn't want to. I think I don't know. I wonder. I don't know. I was just thinking about, like, if you got put in a tomb, like the tomb thing. That just sounds kind of like I wouldn't want to be in a tomb.
Well, I would rather be. My grandparents are the first two people in my family buried in a mausoleum, and I think I would rather be buried in a mausoleum. I mean, it's a drier form of burial, and I'm not putting for nobody, but I used to sell underground real estate when I was younger. It was my first job, actually, as a cemetery salesman. Yeah, underground real estate. Once we put you in, you ain't coming back out.
Oh my God.
But we buried him there, and it was cheaper. And that's the way that they were buried in the old times in caves. Now settlers that came and were moving constantly didn't have a way to keep their dead, so they buried them where they came, where they were.
Yeah.
And I think that's how we get a lot of these ghost stories too. People being buried just random places. We don't know where a burial ground is. I mean, Native Americans lived all over this area, so I mean, maybe Charlie Romans is standing on top of an Indian burial mound right now.
It's possible because this is Kentucky, and Kentucky is like Indian warfare, actually. But it's funny that you were mentioning not knowing where graves were. I probably mentioned this before, but it's Scandinavian myth that combines a couple of things. They say never pull a stake out of the ground, because if you get close to a stake out in the woods, you'll hear a voice that says, "You pull and I'll push." So, and the vampire is an interesting thing, and undead in general, the evolution of what people think and what people fear and things like that. I had a good fortune to talk to a gentleman named Dacre Stoker. He's the great nephew of Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula.
Oh.
And was talking to him after his presentation, which was very interesting. Found out a whole lot about Bram Stoker. And I told him, I said, does anybody else get the fact that Dracula wasn't so powerful because he was a vampire? He was so powerful because he was a sorcerer before he died, which he'd already made all of his pacts. The vampire immortal life thing was just a residual, really. He said, yeah, most people don't get that. They just kind of slap past it.
Yeah, that makes sense, though. I mean, they are like a sorcerer.
Yeah.
So anyhow, he repented in the end.
But I think a lot of it, and keeping in mind that it's so easy to sit here in the 21st century with what we know and look back into the past and think, God, you guys were idiots. These were the intelligent people of the day. They knew what they knew, just like we know what we know. And they were trying to explain them. And like I said before, we yearn toward the spiritual, and I don't think that we really believe this is the end. And if we don't believe it's the end, is it possible for us to connect with those that have passed on? We're coming up on Halloween. It's supposed to be one of the times here where the veil between the living and the dead is the thinnest, and the dead can return. According to old legends and beliefs, and there are certain spots and areas throughout the world that have thought to be a thinner veil between the living and the dead. And I think we are interested in that because we want to know. We want to know the secret. And
kind of reminds me of the movie in the 80s, The Midnight Hour. It had Sherry Belafonte and Peter DeLuise. Remember that show, The Midnight Hour? Had LeVar Burton on it. It was a great show. Have you ever seen it, Charlie?
It sounds familiar. I don't believe I've watched it, but
all through the movie, it had Wolfman Jack on there talking. It's where they break into this museum and they steal these clothes from the people that lived there in the 1700s, where there was a witch and they killed her and they stopped all the evil. Well, they say this spell and it releases the dead, and there's werewolves and zombies and some of them to do things they didn't get to do when they were. It's a really good show. It's got the head honcho, the head star on there is the guy that played Jeff on Girls Just Want to Have Fun. Remember, he danced with Sarah Jessica Parker on Girls Just Want to Have Fun. So I don't remember what his real name is, but he was great on there.
It's 1985 film, The Midnight Hour.
That's it. And I love how it starts out with a little boy putting a little thing on his tire to make his bike sound like a motorcycle. You know how we used to do when we was kids, Charlie? Put a little baseball card on there. And he crushes his finger, and it starts out with Wolfman Jack saying, "Look out, it's the midnight hour, baby." You know, so I love Wolfman Jack. So Charlie, please.
Yeah, we're running out of time.
Tell us something so scary that it will make Mercedes' hair turn white.
A friend of mine told me something once, and we were sitting there talking. We weren't even talking about spooky things, and we were just talking about just general stuff. And suddenly leans in, he said, "You know, if you ever get the feeling you're being wanted, you probably are." Yeah, drive home tonight.
It reminds me of remember when Brahm told the story of the headless horseman?
Yeah,
and he started on his way home. I think I would have stayed all night there at the castle or the house of Katrina. I at least slept on the porch.
Well, so Charles, why don't you tell us what is going on? Like, what are you going to be doing? Any more events for like the holiday season coming up or next year?
Starting the 17th of October to the 19th, I'll be at the Scare Fest in Lexington, Kentucky. On Sunday at 4 o'clock, I'll be speaking, and I'll be talking about how people explain the paranormal through scientific means versus how they explain it through spiritual means, and probably a little bit of everything else too. So, I'm going to do some video work for him up there, and hopefully get to talk to the gentleman who's there with the Warren Museum. Probably right up your alley there, Josh, because almost everything in the Warren Museum is supposed to be demonic. So
is it the new people, Charles? The one that's touring? They just went to Rock Island or something.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, because our friend Dr. Kelly was just there at the Rock. I think Rock Island. I think, and they were there. Well, that's very interesting. You better be safe when you see them.
Well, I was invited on a ghost hunt at the Paramount. Now, the irony of this is, paranormal activity seems to follow me, but it's kind of like in the eaves, you know. I was talking to a lady at the Paramount, and she mentioned Paramount Joe.
Yep.
There's some question about whether or not Paramount Joe was actually a real person. However, there are spirits out there that are listening. So if you talk about something enough, it often manifests.
Right.
So I have an EVP of noises and thumping and everything else, and there are only 2 people in the theater. I was one of them, and I was looking directly at the other one. So I was invited to go on a ghost hunt at the Paramount. And before I left the ghost hunt, I said, there is there's no discussion about this. Anything that's in here does not follow me home. No. And you have to be circumspect about that. It's like I've done a lot of studying about a lot of different things. Like mediumship, for instance. Okay. Be careful to not open a door you don't know you can close. You always have to be very circumspect. And not everything that you see and hear is what you think it is.
That's right.
And if you get too carried away, you may need the services of Josh here.
Yep. And
Speaking of, we probably should say that be sure to watch be sure to watch The Unseen Realm every Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Archbishop Ronald Fell Enright's YouTube, Facebook, and all of his social media. And you will find Bishop Joshua Sparks on there on the panel. I'm the co-producer, so we would love to have everybody check that show out. And you know what? They are working on a television pilot right now for the show. So it's pretty amazing. We're very excited about that. So
anybody to come on and heckle you, Josh, I'm free.
Oh yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that we need to have Charlie tell us one more quick ghost story Something scary.
My hair did not turn white.
It's getting ready to. Hold on.
A man wakes up and in his yard, it's at nighttime, and he thinks maybe he's fallen and hit his head. So he stretches and he hears his bones creak, and you do, because, older people. So he goes walking toward his house, and he notices the house is a good distance away. He was wondering how he ended up in the yard. So as he's walking up to the house in the open bay window, he sees his wife sitting there, and she looks a little different, and she's looks like she's sad, and she's tired. And he's thinking to himself, boy, she looks like she's aged. I wonder what's wrong. I need to ask her if she's sick, how she's feeling. And he comes up there and he realizes he doesn't have the key to his door. So she's right there in the window, and sometimes you can look at something and they'll be aware of you, and they'll look in your direction, because he's not wanting to startle her, because she appears to be sad and worn already. Well, as he stares at her intently, eventually she turns around and looks toward the window. And when she looks out the window and sees him, she screams. And when she screams, sometimes we throw up our hands to protect ourselves. So he throws up his hand like this, and he sees it's skeletal. And when he sees that his hand is skeletal, he realizes that he's been dead for 5 years.
Oh, that's sad. That's scary. And
your hair's changing.
Oh my God, my hair.
That was good. I can't wait to get you back on here, Charlie. It's always a treat to have you.
Oh, it's always fun talking. I mean, and we can talk scary stuff, weird and scary stuff.
This was fun to have some spooky stories.
And those are some of my favorites from the past. And there's some good new ones too. Urban legends are good scary stories.
Well, we'll save that for the next time then, because we better sign off. We got Stan, our producer. We don't want to go over our limit.
Well, thank
you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. We thank you for Vincent being on chat with us. There might be some other people, and if you're there, thank you. Thank you to whoever's going to watch this later, who's watching it now with us. We appreciate you here on the W.E.B. Radio Network. Be sure to watch all the other shows that are on the W.E.B. Radio Network too. They're very good. And then, Bishop Joshua. All right, and Charles Romans. All right. Anybody else want to say goodbye? I'll sit here and keep talking if we don't.
Well, thanks for listening, having me on anytime. I'm willing.
Thank you. We love you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Night, everybody.
Good night. Sleep tight.